Hi everyone, Azriel Knight here, and welcome to part 2 of Darkroom Nights 2021, where I use multiple enlargers, multiple developers, and multiple papers in order to create a limited edition box set of my favorite photos of 2020. I have to admit, yesterday was a surprising success. I had to align my enlarger, and I used a tutorial that had mixed results, so I had to kind of make up my own tutorial on the fly. I used fiber-based prints, which I don't have nearly as much experience as I do with resin-coated prints. Not only that, but it was expired, and of course, all of that while doing it on camera. If you watched A Fortnight of Film last October, then you know that that's what this is all about. It's not necessarily what I know, it's what I'm learning. Of course, there are some people on the one side who will learn a whole bunch from this, and others that will watch me on the other side with way more experience who will just enjoy seeing me on my journey. I decided it was long overdue to create a box set, and the idea was inspired by Ben Horn, and he releases a box set every year, so I thought, why not take my 7 best photos and make 5x7s of them, and then document the entire journey. And here we are on day 2 of that. And I figured it's not just enough to show myself printing on the same enlarger with the same developer and the same paper every day. So I've got a different enlarger today. I'm going to be using a different paper voted by you on Instagram stories, as well as a different developer. Oh, and of course, a different photo. Today should be an interesting one. I've got an enlarger I've never used before, a paper I've used once before, and a developer that expired probably 40 to 50 years ago. Let's get started. This is the Durst F60, and I'm not sure if you can tell, but it is way smaller than my main enlarger that you saw yesterday, the Bessler 23C Series 2. And I actually can fit this one right underneath my other one, but I thought it might be distracting. I didn't want you guessing where this one ended and my other enlarger began, so I took the time to move my massive Bessler out of the way. I got this on Kijiji in the last month. I think I paid 40 bucks for it, and I got some extras with it, like these texture screens that helped me calibrate my Bessler yesterday. Other than having a look at it, I haven't touched it at all. And while I had to clean my Bessler quite thoroughly, I don't actually think I will have to do much to clean this. I'll blow it off a little bit, but this came with a plastic cover, so not a lot of dust has managed to get at it. The other thing is that this came with its own lens. I haven't even looked at it yet to see what lens it is. A Naotar 50mm 3.5. Yeah, I've turned it on to make sure that the lamp works, and that is about it. I'm gonna raise it up a little bit, plug it in, blow the dust off with my handy dandy air blower there, and then just kind of see how everything works. Yeah, it really didn't take long for me to figure this thing out. Let me show you what I've learned. So first off, focusing is accomplished by turning the dial here, and the lens comes down like that. There is a glassless carrier, which will hold 35 or 6x6. So it's basically a 6x6 with a 35 mask, which is pretty inventive if you ask me. A color filter tray above, and the light source is just under here. Maximum 75 watt bulb, and just a cap. No screws, no tension, just a cap holding that into place. I'm guessing it elevates to 8x10. We won't even need that today. We're just printing 5x7s. And in addition to going up and down, there's a dial back here. If you loosen that up, then you can tilt it 15 degrees in either direction. That's about it. I didn't notice too much else. It's a really simple, compact system, probably designed for the amateur. Now, because it only seems to tilt left and right, aligning it to make sure it's all squared off was fairly simple. It only needed a minor adjustment in order to get it right. Okay, I used the level to make sure that everything was straight on, and then just like yesterday, I used the texture screen to make sure that all the dots within the frame were sharp, and they were. This thing was so clean. The guy said he had it in his garage for like 15 years. You know, I know he said the plastic was on it, but still, it must have been a super clean garage too, because there was more dust on my Bessler yesterday than on this thing. Even though the lens had a cap as well, I gave it a good blow off with the air duster there. Yeah, the enlarger is all good to go. This thing's adorable. I can't wait to use it. Next up is the developer of the day, and I think you're in for quite a treat. I've never seen anything like this before. Some of you old-timers will recognize this. An itty-bitty box of Dektol. Not only that, single serving size Dektol. Amazing. These packs are super sealed. I don't know how old this is, but I'm guessing it's 40 to 50 years old. For photographic purposes only. What else would you use Dektol with? For prints and enlargements on cold tone papers. With continuous stirring, slowly add the contents of 1 packet to 8 ounces of water at 21 Celsius. Continue stirring until all the chemicals are dissolved and a uniform solution is obtained. This working solution is equivalent to a 1:2 dilution of Dektol stock solution. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm reading this right. Okay, so you don't actually dilute this. This working solution is equivalent to a 1:2 dilution of stock. So you mix it and it's done. So I'll actually have to mix a couple of packets. And what it says down here is 8 ounces of developer are adequate for approximately 15 5x7 prints or equivalent. Well, isn't that convenient? Because I am making exactly 15 5x7 prints today. To ensure full submersion, I will be using 2 packets of this today. If you're new to the channel, you probably haven't seen this before, but this is my magnetic stirrer, and I've got a thermometer up top. It won't be hard to get the water to 71 Fahrenheit. Now that the enlarger's all ready and the developer's all ready, let's talk about today's paper. I asked you guys which resin-coated paper I should print with today, either Ilford RC Portfolio or Arista 2 VC, and by a narrow margin of 51%, you guys chose Arista 2 RC. As I say a lot these days, I'm going to be completely honest, it was about 50-50, and I made the deciding vote. I really like the Arista 2. It's already 5x7, so that saves me a bit of time today considering how long yesterday was. But yeah, it was like right on the mark, and I made the extra vote. I can't vote more than once, so I didn't cheat the system. I just made an extra vote. That's the funny thing, like a fortnight of film, almost all of the choices on you know, this or that, 1 or 2, A or B. It always seemed to be like a photo finish, you know, excuse the pun, but yeah, really close. Almost, it's never been like an 84% win or anything like that. It's always been 50 to 55% or something crazy like that. Always super close. Just like everything else, people are divided. I used this a couple weeks ago for fulfilling my Patreon perk, and it was a sealed box at the time. There's no fog, so I don't need to do a fog test today. Now let's talk about today's photo. Today's photo is, again, from a fortnight of film, and not all of the photos in this week's miniseries are going to be from a fortnight of film, but I mean, I shot 17 rolls in 17 days. There's bound to be a few gems in there, I would hope, anyway. This one was shot on Kodak XX, again with my Nikon FE. Pretty much all my 35mm shots are going to be with the Nikon FE. I think there's one with the Pentax MX, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I was overall not super duper impressed with Kodak XX. I found it was really hard to nail the exposure, but when it did, it really nailed the exposure. Here's the photo I'm using. It's this super, it almost looks like a pencil drawing of flowers with snow on it. It was really weird. It was a really weird weather situation. It had, I think it was like the first snowfall of the year. So, you know, Calgary didn't know what season it wanted to be. And this is just a beautiful shot. I believe I used this also for one of my previous patron perks. I mean, it makes sense, right, that I would use my best photos to send to my patrons. So if there are some patrons out there, I'm sorry to disappoint you that the box set might be a little repetitive if you wanted to get your hands on one. I have to be honest and consistent with what I think are my best shots. And this is one of my favorite photos of the year. This is one of the 7 best photos I've taken this year and probably in multiple years. And it's funny because sometimes you spend a lot of time like building up and preparing for a photo and it doesn't work out. And other times you just walk past something, snap, snap, and it turns out to be incredible. It's a bit of a busy shot. It's not necessarily the best composition I've ever done. It's sort of like a, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a collage, but it's so beautiful, and I'm really happy to be able to print it again. Now, Arista 2 is a variable contrast paper, and the instructions say that Ilford contrast filters do work on it, and I have used it, and it did work. I think that the last time I did this print, though, I did it on Ilford paper, and I used a 0 contrast filter. I might punch that up a bit today. Okay, so I have encountered my first problem. This little doodad here is my contrast filter holder. These little screws here, they tighten over the lens, and then it goes like that. Except there is not enough space for me to wrap the filter around. At least I don't think. If it fits, it's going to be tight. That is tight, and now I can't adjust the aperture. Interesting. I'm going to have to give that some thought. Okay, I decided to consult the data sheet because I wondered, well, what happens when you use a variable contrast paper, but you don't use a contrast filter? And it says right here, okay, when exposed with no filter, the paper gives a contrast of approximately grade 2 and is approximately 1 stop faster than other photographic papers such as Ilford and Kodak. So I won't need as quick of exposure time, obviously, because there's no filter in the front. And I was going to use a grade 2 anyway. I think I'm just going to leave the filters out of this one. But yeah, enlarger's ready, developer's ready, negative is in there and focused. Now on to the test strip. I've done 2 test strips so far. Here's the first test strip. I stopped down 2 stops from wide open and I did 1.5 second intervals. It was too much. It looked like the 1.5 second mark might have been it. I wanted to be able to have more control, so I went 3 stops down from wide open, and now I've got this. Again, 1.5 second intervals. So 1.5, 3, 4.5, and so on. Obviously, 1.5 is too light. To me, the question is 3 to 4.5. And in my opinion, I'd like to try a 4-second exposure and see how that looks. Okay, here we are with a 4-second exposure, and I gotta say, overall, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful shot. I still love this photo. I don't think a contrast 2 is gonna work. This snow here, when I used a 0 filter, it was blown out, but not completely blown out like it is. It's all the detail is lost, and there is more detail to be had there. Same with the surrounding area. The 0 filter really worked. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold the filter right up to the lens. Yeah, so it's going to be back to the drawing board. As painful as it is, got to start over. Okay, I did a couple more test strips. This is my most recent one. I ended up getting the filter thing on the lens after stopping down to what I needed to, which is back down to just 2 stops from wide open. I've got a 0 filter on there, and these are 3-second intervals. It's really hard to define each interval, but basically it's 3, 6, 9, 12, and then it becomes really hard to tell. But there's 15-ish, 18-ish, 21-ish. Yeah, on the camera from here on, you could barely tell at all. So after a very careful examination of the last test strip, I ended up going with a 15-second exposure, and it was too dark. I took a little break, I let it dry, and it was too dark. I was focusing way too much on that one chunk of snow. I didn't want it to be blown out whatsoever, and that's just not realistic. So I went with a 10-second exposure, and I got this. I think this photo turned out absolutely gorgeous. I love the way the petals rendered. There is just something hyper-realistic about the way it turned out. There's also a surprising amount of detail. I really nailed my exposure. The Arista 2 paper is fantastic. It has very little curl. And I know a lot of people don't like glossy paper, but I don't mind it at all. As far as the Durst F60 is concerned, I think this was a fine enlarger. I mean, considering just how compact it is, it basically does 80% of what my Bessler does. There are features on my Bessler that the Durst doesn't have, but I very rarely, if ever, utilize those features, like the tilting and stuff like that. The only thing that was frustrating is that once my contrast filter holder was in place, I couldn't adjust my aperture as much as before. There was some restriction, and that is due to the knob right here, which brings out a safety filter in case you want to focus with a red light. But if you have an opportunity to pick up one of these, especially at a decent price, like $40 like I did, I say go for it. Well, that wraps up day 2. Man, I am so exhausted. I was completely unprepared for this. I said to myself, oh, it can't be as hard as a fortnight of film. In a fortnight of film, I've got to go out. I've got to choose locations. I've got to find parking. I've got to find photos. But working in a darkroom all day has its own challenges. And it isn't that much of a time saver whatsoever. Also, it is so easy to get distracted because you can just go upstairs, take a break, watch some TV for a bit, come back down, and Whereas when you're out shooting, you're out shooting. You are there to do a job, and that's it. That being said, I'm still enjoying it, as frustrating and as anxious as it's making me at times because of all the different challenges that come with a different enlarger and a different paper and a different developer every day. Like, for example, I thought I was going to be able to get away with half a liter of Dectol, but partway through I realized that I needed to add another half a liter because I was holding the paper down underneath the liquid, and 500 milliliters in an 8x10 tray is just not enough, not even for a 5x7, so I definitely needed to add some liquid there. So all those little things, like the contrast filter, that not working, and then trying it without, then trying it with, and then, multiple test strips today. All those little things, they add time, right? And when you got to videotape it on top of it, that adds time. So yeah, like I said, a whole new set of challenges that I didn't expect when I decided I was going to do this. If you enjoy videos like this, one of the biggest things that you can do to help is to do a direct PayPal donation in the link. $1, $5, $10, every little bit counts. Again, link in the description. Any amount will help. You can also join me on Patreon. On my Patreon, you'll get things like early access, your name in the credits, and free prints. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And until next time, stay classic.